So it seems that Games Workshop have sent yet another wave of miniatures to Legends. Let's talk about the latest casualties and the fairly clear indications it gives us of what's coming next. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today we're talking about Games Workshop's model removals, and at the same time as we had the massive amount of content dropped on us for the balanced data slate, all sorts of new points, rules, and errata for the game. There were also a good few casualties from a miniatures point of view, a bunch of stuff taken out of their indexes and moved over to the Legends side of things. What's more, it does look like the miniatures that were on sale for them, that still had models on sale, they've all suddenly gone out of production, so it's a bunch of stuff being taken away. Once more, the casualties fall on a bunch of Forge World models, and this time it looks like it's the Tyranids and the Necrons that are taking hits. The Necrons lost 4 units, and the Tyranids lost 2. A few of them were kind of competitively relevant, so it might have a little bit of an impact on a couple of the armies, but as per normal with most Forge World units, they tended to be a bit more on the peripheral side. I feel like this is more a hit in terms of people who had and liked the models getting good rule support going forward, as opposed to primarily being a gameplay thing. This one is actually an interesting change in that it just really underlines the trend that Games Workshop's going for with 10th edition. So far with the Codex releases we've had some things that survive and some things that don't, but this set of removals basically got rid of a whole load of miniatures that survived when otherwise people were a bit worried that they might not have, and it goes to show that unless you're Custodes, Imperial Knights, or a super heavy Forge World unit, basically your 40k rules are almost certainly on borrowed time. Definitely worth showcasing to anyone thinking about picking stuff up for 40k purposes, as it's not really something that Games Workshop's going to advertise. Let's talk about the kits, what going to Legends mean for them, and what these changes kind of clearly show is on the way for Forge World models for other factions. First up for the Necrons, the first two removed miniatures were a Tomb Stalker and Tomb Sentinel, a sort of medium-sized Canoptech brawlers, kind of fun centipede millipede type things, one with a great big ranged energy cannon and one with some Gauss slicers. In game in 10th edition they hadn't been enormously strong, though I'd say they were kind of usable in Canoptech Court in more casual games. No one really ran them in competitive though. Their rules moved over from the Imperial Armor Necrons document and are now in the Necron Legends document. It also looks like Games Workshop have updated their web store in tandem, these now being listed as sold out online. Usually the difference between these is temporarily out of stock means that they've gone away for a bit and are coming back, whereas sold out online means that they're completely going away. The other two units for the Necrons are the Tesseract Arc and the Canoptech Acanthrites. In terms of people who might actually have been playing with the rules in 10th edition, I feel like the Acanthrites might have been a unit that a few people might have picked up. They're the sort of mysteriously hovering Canoptech Wasp things, and they had the Infiltrators keyword, so one of the two options that Necrons have for that alongside flayed ones. I'd say in Canoptech Court they were really quite usable for the role. It meant that you could put bodies on the power matrix and establish that from turn 1, perhaps having one unit as an auxiliary alongside a Canoptech Wraith unit deployed in the centre of the board with that enhancement. Their stat lines weren't amazingly strong after that. They've had some fun melter guns, a tiny bit of melee, and an okay-ish but not standout debuff rule, but I'd say they were far more usable than most Forge World units. The Tesseract Arc is a bit of a medium-sized vehicle with a fun singularity generator for variations of different firepower, plus some okay secondary weapon backup with Gauss or Tesla cannons, again not really run in competitive Necron lists all that much, but I did think that the sort of curiously almost circular miniature design was quite a cool one. Again, unfortunately, it looks like these have gone to sold out online, removed from the web store, and the rules sent to Legends, pretty much declared dead by Games Workshop at this point from their point of view, and yet more Forge World things phased out of 40k. For the Necrons, it now leaves just the Seraptech Heavy Construct all on its lonesome in the Imperial Armor Necrons document. This one's not marked as sold out, it's either on sale or temporarily out of stock, though I believe they took away one of its weapon options, so it only has the one set of additional weapons that you can pick up for it right now. It's a bit sad for the Necron Forge World range, which had a fair bit of cool stuff in the past, all the Gauss pylons, some special characters, and a few other things like the Night Shroud Bomber, and we're just left with the big super heavy, as by Games Workshop's previously stated policy of Forge World is mainly just going to be for big things in 40k that they can't make in plastic. For the Tyranids, the casualties were the Barbed Hierodule and the Scythed Hierodule. There were two of the last four Tyranid kits remaining, alongside the Harridan and the Hierophant Biotitan. They didn't have the biggest Forge World range in the world compared with some of them, but they did have a bit more than this. Things like that Dimacaron, Sky Slasher Swarms, and Shrikes have gone over the years. Take a look in the web store, these guys are just fully gone there. I feel like I might have seen them get taken away at some point a while in the past. I can't really remember at time of recording. I would say that perhaps their sculpts haven't aged quite as well as a few of the others for the Tyranids, but there were a few more big fun monster options, a little bit bigger than a Tyrannofex in terms of weight class, packing some serious firepower and scary melee, a bit more heavily focused on the damage dealing. That just leaves the two gargantuan monstrous creatures in the Harridan and the Hierophant left, so Tyranids just for super heavies from now. Otherwise, looks like the other Imperial armor things are safe from Legends right at the moment. It doesn't look like Crusaders and Death Court Assassins have been updated to Legends for the Sisters of Battle. We were kind of expecting them to go there though, given that they were removed from the Codex. Feels like it's not impossible they could get redone at some point in the future, maybe in the same sort of way that the Archoflagellants did, though no telling at the moment. I think with the removal of these things, though, it perhaps gives us even more of a clear idea what Games Workshop are doing with their Forge World things in the future. They had stated previously that it was their general intention to gradually wind down Forge World models from the core 40k game for some time now. For quite a while, they've had no new Forge World model releases for the setting. Gradually, things have been going out of production for a while, usually followed by rules being removed for them. Forge World itself seems to be focusing on character miniatures for the Horus Heresy, plus things for Games Workshop specialist games, individual small sculpting projects, maybe for things that don't have quite as big a demand as 40k. As mentioned, Games Workshop had said that their intention was for 40k Forge World to just focus on big things, things like Titans and Super Heavies that they can't make in plastic. I think now, particularly after this particular removal set, it kind of gives away their time horizon that that's set to happen basically in its entirety within 10th edition, and the previous survival of those Necrons and Tyranid things maybe gave us a bit of cause to believe that they wouldn't remove literally everything that isn't a big thing, but it seems that that's not the case. Whenever I've talked about this in the past, there's usually a fair bunch of comments saying that Legends isn't 100% bad for everyone, and plenty of people use Legends rules just fine in 40k, and I do agree that that's true. First of all, if nothing else, it's better to have nominal rules for a casual setting compared with none at all. Games Workshop giving their models Legends rules rather than just removing them from the game outright, I guess is one step better than they could do. And in 10th edition in particular, they have been trying to make Legends a bit more mainstream. Previously, they said that you could use them with permission for your opponent, that language was dropped for 10th edition, and from their official line, they're pretty much game legal outside of more organised tournament play. You can use them in match play, and they do have points values. However, I'd still say that for a whole load of people out there, being sent to Legends is generally still seen as pretty bad news. It means that the models are excluded from any future balance updates, so there's some sense of things being potentially a bit pointless to theory craft around if you're trying to make a good army list. If you manage to make something super great with Legends units, it might just be because Games Workshop haven't bothered to balance them, and the rules will gradually get more and more disconnected from the current rules for the army when you have things like digital balance updates happening all the time like they do. They're definitely playable in a casual setting, but not everyone likes to play with or against them as a result. Plenty of people basically deciding to drop Legends units when they go into that way. For everything besides big fun narrative games, being mothballed is really bad news for them in the long term as well. They'll basically get progressively worse rule support for a miniature that Games Workshop doesn't make until eventually they get nothing at all. The faction loses some cool units as the kits generally go off sale. And of course, for anyone who has invested big in genuine Forge World stuff, it's a bit of a feels bad given that Forge World is quite so expensive. Say if you just spend £81 or $124 on a rather extortionate Necron Tesseract arc, Games Workshop potentially a week or two later suddenly announcing that it's no longer a thing in 40k anymore and giving you some token rules in place isn't really going to go down too well. As mentioned though, I think these removals show basically what we can expect for the rest of the edition, as they kind of complete the pattern of removing anything that isn't either Imperial Knights, Custodes, or great big gargantuan monstrous creature or Titanic units. I feel like plenty of Necrons and Tyranids players might have thought that these kits were safe for one more edition worth of support after they didn't go away with the Codex, but shows that things can get removed from that even between codexes now. And it is pretty consistent throughout all the other things. Space Marines lost everything in their Heresy range and just have the Astrius and Thunderhawk. Tau lost everything besides Manta's Supremacy Armor and Tiger Sharks, which I'm guessing Games Workshop considers just big enough to be a gargantuan thing. Orcs lost everything besides their gargantuan Squiggoth, even if some things like that Grot Megatank are still on sale, and Chaos basically lost all their Forge World units, perhaps coming out of all of this worst. Custodes kept their Forge World things, but Games Workshop has stated that they've been treated differently. We'll get onto them in just a second. For the rest of the Codex releases in 40k though, I think we can now say that it's odds on that basically nothing from Forge World is probably going to survive, besides Knights, Custodians and Super Heavies, so anything that doesn't fit that bill is probably going to get sent to Legends. Unfortunately, by far the biggest losers on that on the 40k front are Guard players. They've always had one of the single biggest Forge World lines, with a massive amount of variant tanks and vehicles and things. It certainly has been chipped away in really big ways over the past few years, but there's still really quite a massive amount of stuff left. I'm not sure how many of their Titanic units will survive. Hopefully all of them. I genuinely do hope that I'm wrong. Lots of things like the cool Medusa batteries, Cyclops demolition vehicles, Trojan support tanks and all the rest do manage to stay online for them. I feel like they're not in the worst place in the world at the moment, kind of mothballed in terms of being strong in game but still playable and supported, but honestly my hopes aren't really too high. I certainly bear that in mind for any Guard players out there getting their hands on Malcadors and things for the Solar Auxilia. There's at least a reasonable chance there'll be Legends rules eventually going forward, which as mentioned isn't necessarily the absolute end of the world, but also you wouldn't want that to come as a surprise. Hopefully they do manage to redo things like the Krieg Cavalry, which there have been some rumours about them getting a plastic release at some point. Fingers crossed the Guard get some more goodies with their codex coming in 10th, but I feel like the near inevitable Forge World Legend changes for the Guard is going to be a painful one. Otherwise, the second biggest faction to lose the most stuff look like they're going to be the Eldari, things like Shadow Spectres, unless they redo them in plastic, Hornets, several medium-sized grav tanks, and potentially things like the Skavak Wraith Knight. I feel like a bunch of these would have to be kind of nervous as to whether or not they get sent to Legends. Finally though, I feel like perhaps the most intriguing question is what happens with Knights and Custodies. Both of these are kind of small ranges where they have just as much stuff in Forge World, if not more, as their main codexes, and Games Workshop had tried to reassure people at the start of 10th edition, saying that their ranges would be treated differently to the rest, and they weren't aiming to wind them down just yet. I feel like that guarantee is going to remain true for 10th edition, though what happens in the future is definitely still up for debate. Games Workshop doesn't really commit to supporting anything 100% indefinitely these days, and I still feel they're maybe not completely out of the woods. My honest guess is for them that the reason they decided to treat them differently in the first place is they're all going to get new plastic releases, but those plastic releases will probably be primarily aimed at the Horus Heresy as opposed to Warhammer 40k, as the Forge World units there tend to be just a lot more associated with that setting, at least in Games Workshop's mind. The Knights updates have already been happening. We've seen 3 of the Cerastus Knights turn from resin to plastic, and there were some rumours that the Styrex and Megaera are going to follow. And then for Custodies, it seems inevitable that they're going to get a full plastic range refresh similar to Solar Auxilia and the upcoming Mechanicum release for Heresy at some point. My honest hope is that they do that, and then they just guarantee that those models are staying around for Warhammer 40k as well, and people can get their hands on a bunch of cool stuff like the Telemon Heavy Dreadnought, Caladius tanks, or these Venatari Custodians, and not have to pay Forge World prices for them, or find 3D printed near proxies, or pirate them off recasters. Given what Games Workshop has been doing so wholesale to the rest of Forge World though, and what they did basically with the entire Chaos Forge World range and the entire Space Marine Forge World range going off to Heresy and not coming back, it's just hard to really take these as any sort of guarantee for 40k in the long term. I'm sure they'll stick around for 10th edition, but I must admit with the amount of time, effort and money invested into a 40k army, I must admit I'd still be a bit wary as to going too heavy into these, just in case they turn around at the start of 11th edition and do what they did with Space Marines, just after people have picked up loads of new shiny Leviathan Dreadnoughts and Contemptor Dreadnoughts and things for use in 40k, and then sent them all to Legends. I think it would be great if Games Workshop makes them all in plastic and makes them just good for both settings permanently from then on, but so far just about every change that they have made has tended to lock miniatures to one setting or another. They really seem not to want to have things that are cross-compatible anymore, and I'm not really sure why that is. Maybe they want distinct settings for like marketing purposes or something, but it just really doesn't feel like it's something that they actually need to do. In any case though, I'll leave that there for today. Let me know your thoughts on the news of the Necrons and the Tyranids going to Legends. How do you think the Guard and Eldari ranges are going to fare out of their codexes? What's going to survive, if anything? And how much faith do you have of shiny plastic knights and potentially plastic custodies surviving with full 40k rule support into the far future? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, and I do tend to post new things most days. I'll certainly keep up with Games Workshop's news releases and inevitable future things being sent to Legends. Otherwise, if you'd like to help support my content, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep these coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.